Hey there, welcome to Resin Conversion Kits 101. I'm going to be building this resin conversion kit for the Master Grade Force Impulse Gundam as a commission for a friend, and so I thought since I'm doing this anyway, I would make this short video series to kind of go over just the very basics of how to deal with a resin conversion kit. And so if you're unfamiliar with that, what we're going to do in this first episode is just kind of give you an intro, and we'll do an inventory of all the parts that are in this resin conversion kit box so that we know that we've got everything we need and we're ready to build. So what is a resin conversion kit? Basically, what it does is it takes a regular plastic model kit, in this case, the Bandai Master Grade Force Impulse Gundam here, and it replaces most of the outer armor parts, so all the colored plastic parts you see on this model kit get replaced with resin cast parts that are here in this box that the resin conversion kit came in. And the reason that we only replace the outer parts is that way we get to keep the nice inner frame that has, you know, the really nice articulation. That's easier to do with plastic parts, and it's going to be more sturdy and hold up better over time. So there are complete resin kits that are just, you know, the entire kit made out of resin pieces that you can buy. But I prefer these conversion kits because that way you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get the super detailed look of the outer resin parts, but you still get the inside inner frame of the original plastic kit that provides good structure and stability and posability as well. So I'm going to set this kit off to the side and we'll take a look here at what comes in our resin conversion kit. Now this particular kit is a very high quality one, and so not every resin conversion kit that you're going to buy is going to have, for example, an instruction book that is this thick. And this instruction book is mostly just photos of the painted final kit, so you can use those as a reference. I think it even up here in the front has some paint guides if you want to use the paint colors that they recommend. And it's even got an alternate color scheme somewhere in here as well. Yeah, if you want to go with this kind of purple and gold version instead. Of course, these resin parts come uncolored, so you can paint them any color you want. This one also came with some water slide decal markings, and we'll set those off to the side and use them eventually. But the most important part of a resin kit instruction book, even if it doesn't have all these fancy pictures, and sometimes it's just a bunch of printed pieces of paper stapled together, if you don't have a super fancy resin kit, the most important part is here where it actually has the instructions for assembly. And so what this is doing is it's giving you an inventory of the parts here that you're going to need for the chest unit, and then it shows pictures of these are the plastic parts that, you know, comprise the inner frame that you just leave together, and then here's where you're putting the different resin parts on top of there. And it has that for each individual section of the kit, just like so. And you can see here, like the arms and shoulders have a lot more resin parts than just the chest unit had. So what we want to do as a very first step to make sure that we have all the parts we need, because if you pay attention here, these are kind of labeled with some sort of letter and number designations, but they're not labeled here in these bags. So most resin kits will come in these kind of air-sealed bags, and all of the parts are in here. They've probably been packed by hand. That's how most of these kits are put together. And so since they're packed by hand, we want to go through here and make sure that we have all of the parts. And so what I'm going to be doing is cutting these out one at a time and going through here with our instructions and doing an inventory to make sure that we have all of these parts. And I'm going to go ahead and group them by, you know, arms and shoulders, waist, all of those different sections of the kit. And then I've got some little part sorting trays that are 3D printed that I use that I'm going to then put all of these into just to make sure that I've got them all and we're good to go. So that's the first step of building a resin kit, is just to inventory all your parts. So I'm going to do that here today, and then we can actually get started building. And this is the method that I like to use. So as I'm cutting the parts out, I just lay them on top of the little inventory here on the part sheet. Now, some of these really small ones, it's hard to figure out by looking here, or maybe they're over here in one of these other ones. It's hard to figure out which one's which. And so for some of these pockets here of my air-sealed packaging that have the small parts, I'll just go ahead and cut them open now and take all these parts out and set them off to the side. And I find that that makes it easier in the future to look through and see which one's which. So like, I don't think that any of these parts here are what we're looking for here with these little ones, but just taking them out of the package here and setting them off to the side allows me to take a better look at them. And during that process, then hopefully I can use that to figure out which parts are actually the ones we need. So this is, again, a bit of a tedious process. It's important, though, that you go through and you make sure you have all the parts. And a lot of these small detailed ones look really similar to one another. So be real careful and make sure that you're picking out the right ones that exactly match the pictures that you see there in the instruction book's inventory list. So again, I'm going to go through some of these smaller parts. I'm going to cut them out, set them off to the side here, and then we'll go through and figure out which ones match up here with our part. And then once we're finished with that, we'll just grab all of these and put them over here in one section of our container. I'll go ahead and label it for the chest unit. We'll move on to the next page and we'll keep going. So here's another example of something that you'll want to watch out for. Sometimes these parts come kind of combined together onto a single larger piece of resin that we're going to cut off later and clean up. But this, for example, these two little parts right here are, I'm pretty sure these two parts right here, they just came together on this one piece. So I'm going to put those here, and you'll find that a lot of the really small parts do that just because it's easier for them to keep them together that way when they package them up. And be careful when you're dealing with these very small ones also not to lose them, of course. There are some very tiny parts in some of these resin kits. Now here we have an example of 3 parts that they put all together. So there's these 3 separate vent parts. These are kind of these 2 triangular ones, and then there's this other one in between. I'm pretty sure now that these 2 outer ones are these 15 and 16 that we're looking for here, but this middle one isn't on this page. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my hobby knife to cut this one apart, and then we'll keep the other 2, and we'll put them here with our parts that we're sorting, and we'll put this one off to the side, and I'm sure we'll find a place to use it eventually. And so even after cutting out all of the small pieces that seemed like they might be the ones we're looking for here and kind of looking through them, and by the way, I apologize, I realize I probably shouldn't have used this desk mat since it's kind of the same color as the resin parts. I'll switch it up for the next video so that if this is confusing and hard to see for you, it'll be better next time, I promise. Anyway, I haven't still found these very 2 small tiny triangular pieces or this piece here. Now one thing you can do is you can look here in the instructions for where this gets used. So this number 14 goes right here. So it's going to go kind of in the triangular opening here in the top of this one, which gives us an idea of what size it would be. And it shouldn't be a pair, right? So it's like, it's not one of these, for example, even though that kind of looks like it might fit in the thing. First of all, because this is a vent and that's not what this piece looks like. But secondly, because I see that this one has a pair and they came out of the packaging together as a pair, which is why I've been trying to kind of sort these and keep them together with the group that they were with when I take them out of the packaging. So things like that are obviously a pair are not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a single part that has that kind of pointed shape to it. And I'm not seeing it here, and same with these 2 very small ones. They are just these 2 little fins that go right here on either side of kind of the neck collar piece. And so what I will do, because I don't want to spend forever looking through these parts, and I'm sure once I've pared this down, it'll be easier to find them. I'm going to go ahead and just circle with a pencil the ones that I still haven't found, and then we'll go ahead and take all of these parts and put them off to the side in my little sorting tray here. And we know that we can always come back and we need to locate these 3 parts later on, and then we can go to the next page and keep going with the waste unit. Just a note as well, this denotes that there are 2 of these, so this 16 is times 2. So there are 2 of those there. I don't believe that existed on the previous page when we were looking through the last segment of parts. But you'll see that especially with arms and legs, because of course you need duplicates of parts since there were 2 arms and 2 legs. All right, we're moving forward. I didn't see these 14 and 15 little vent pieces. I found everything else, and I actually did find the other 2 parts that we had circled on the previous page that we were missing from here while I was looking through the parts again. And so I went ahead and put those in there. So these are all the waste parts with the exception of those 2 that I just circled. And we should be good to move on to the next section. These are those 2 larger vents that I was missing for the waste unit over here. So that'll finish up that. As I said, usually if I move on, rather than just spending forever trying to find 1 or 2 parts that are missing, I will just see them as I'm going on later, and I'll remember that that's what I wanted to use to finish out a section of the parts that I had skipped earlier. We're done with this bag. I just wanted to point out, when you're finished with a bag, there might be these little tabs left over that have broken off. These are the tabs that in the next episode, actually, we're going to clean off of all of these things, cut them off and sand them down. They're left over from when the resin gets poured into the molds. So sometimes those break off in the packaging, and you just want to make sure that when you empty a bag that the only thing left are these little scraps, and that you haven't left behind some tiny pieces somewhere. But in that case, we are done with that bag. It is completely empty except for a couple of those little tabs. And one last thing to note with these parts. If you find some parts like this one here that are taped onto a piece of cardboard, that's usually an indication that these have very sharp or delicate points that might break off, and so they packed them this way. There's 2 on the front and 2 on the back of this particular piece to protect them so that they wouldn't break in shipping as the box is being moved around. So for me, I'm going to leave these attached to the cardboard like this. Usually this happens with like V-fins on Gundams and things like that. Anything that has a sharp point that might break off. So I'm going to keep them like this for now. These are these parts right here. And eventually we'll take them off of that piece of cardboard, but for now I want to protect them and don't, make sure I don't accidentally break them. And we are now done. We've emptied out all of these plastic bags. So the parts that are here left on the desk, hopefully, will match up with the things that we still haven't matched up here on the instructions. And they do. So that is perfect. That means that I was able to find all of the parts correctly, and we're not missing anything. Now, if you are missing parts, some resin kit manufacturers allow you to contact them, let them know, and they'll send you replacement parts. It's usually a bit of a tricky process, and if you're going to do that, you want to make sure you do this inventory step shortly after you buy the kit. For me, this particular resin kit has been sitting in my backlog for, I don't know, like maybe at least a few years. And so there would probably be no way for me right now to be able to contact and get missing parts because I just waited too long. So if you are concerned about that sort of thing, make sure that you do this inventory step as quickly as you can. But anyway, here we are. So these are all our parts sorted. We know that we have everything we need. in the next episode of this series, we're going to go through all of these parts and cut off all of the little tabs that are here that are left over from the resin casting process and clean that up with a bit of sanding and get them ready to test fit together to make sure that they fit correctly. So that'll be in the next episode. I hope to see you then. And until then, I hope you have a good day.